论何时与你相识，我都直。我姓石，执笔写词犹如骏马在奔驰。我姓石，无论何时与你相识，我都直。我姓石，执笔写词犹如骏。
Alright, let's skip the formalities and needlessly long preambles. Hello, I am Zimzim, your friendly neighborhood fishman, and this is an analysis of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, the first part of it specifically, because A, I got a lot of free time, and B, I am a lot more passionate than I initially thought. Now, so we can all be on the same page here, I'll focus specifically on the writing, and mainly the writing of the two main characters, and Riku to a certain extent since he is kind of important. I'll try to keep my personal feelings out of this analysis, so we can all see what works and what doesn't about these characters and the series as a whole. And there's plenty that works and doesn't work here, trust me. Now I expect viewers of this video to have already seen Season 2, so we can all have full context in mind, since I'll only give it where it is necessary. Now, let's analyze.
我姓石，无论何时与你相识，我都直。我姓石，执笔写词犹如骏马在奔驰。
So first things first, Gojo and Geto. Who are they? What do we know about them from previous seasons? We know Gojo is a charismatic Jujutsu sorcerer who doesn't take things too seriously. He mostly jokes around because nothing can really pose a threat to him. But when things get dire for people around him, he seems to have a change of attitude. He's a simple yet entertaining character. Geto is standing there. That's pretty much it. Unless you watched the movie. Let's just forget about the movie for now, but I will get to it later. Anyway, in the series itself, we didn't know pretty much anything about Geto. We didn't even know that he was friends with Gojo, nor even his name if I'm being honest. So he had nothing going for him. So this is a great opportunity to make him more interesting. Both characters are relatively thin, one much more than the other, so exploring their past and seeing these two now enemies being friends can allow for a lot of good development. So let's take a look at what Season 2 did with them in short. I would also like here to apologize for the audio, because it fucking sucks and I can't do anything else to fix it. Apologies in advance. One of the stronger parts of Season 2 is that we get to see another side of Geto and Gojo, their friendship. Seeing these two share screen time is always entertaining and makes them a lot more human and or likable. Problem is, most of this is in the first two episodes and it's kinda lacking in the later half. We also get to see an inexperienced Gojo, one that clearly isn't taking anything seriously because he is 100% sure he is unbeatable. He's a Gojo that fails. A Gojo that has a character flaw that he has to overcome. Well, sort of. Either way, it does make him a bit more interesting, although the execution could have been much better. Another thing we get to see is their philosophies that they may or may not believe. Where am I going with all of this? Well, what am I basically saying is that Season 2 does allow for some neat characterization for both of these characters. But how is this all executed? How is their journey executed? And does it make sense? Well, let's delve into it further to find out. Let's take a look at Gojo's introduction. He destroys what appeared to be a threatening enemy instantly. He proceeds to say, possibly mocking her, and it is clear that he did not imagine for a second that anything was going to go wrong in this rescue mission. What we learn from this? The way he just smiles and acts so nonchalantly, his overall attitude shows that he believes there is no danger in the situation he's in. And if I was to pinpoint a character flaw for him, that is it. He is overconfident in his and his friends' abilities. He believes that nothing could ever beat them, which is the result of being born with such overpowered powers. Who wouldn't be overconfident with the power to not be touched by anything? Who would take any situation seriously like this? And that is what comes and bites him in the ass later. Probably, maybe, kinda. We'll get to it when we'll get to it. And the scene proceeds to show them beating the curse with ease, and then realize that one of them has forgotten about the veil. That someone being Gojo. which reinforces Gojo's carelessness. So overall, this is a pretty great introduction into his character. We get a lot of chemistry between him and Geto as well, and there are also a lot of really good setups for what comes later, like his carelessness, fact that he doesn't take anything seriously, all of this character flaw stuff, as well as his show-off nature. So far so good. The next thing we learn about him he is edgy. It's a philosophy that fits with his character given what we know about him, but does he really believe what he's saying here? Or does he only believe it to a certain extent? Maybe he doesn't believe it at all. It's a thing that gets explored in a pretty subtle way, might I add. Either way, this adds a lot more depth to Gojo's more simple character, that does seem to get a lot more deeper as we go along. We see he is also eager for a fight no matter what, even for petty reasons like philosophy disagreements with a friend, which fits his arrogant and show-off nature we see a lot throughout the season, which is also a pretty good setup for what comes later. All of this eagerness for fight has a point at the end. So far the character has been introduced perfectly, in some pretty subtle ways might I add. A lot of characterization has been done both through character actions and dialogue, just giving some credit where credit is due. Moving forward. Alright, let's skip forward quite a bit to the introduction of Rico, not because there's nothing to comment on, in fact there's too much to comment on and I'd like to keep it more brief. Alright, so at first, he does see her as an annoying little brat he has to babysit. It is more of a chore for him, which is in line with his beliefs, but the more the show goes on, the more you see a more softer side of Gojo. We see those beliefs he said earlier tested as to whether or not he really believes them. And the first sign of this softer side of him is this little clip.
ゆとり極まれりだな。ああは言っていたが、同化後彼女は天元、友人、家族、大切な人たちとは好きにさせよう。それが私たちの任務だ。
リコ様にご家族はおりません。以来、私がお世話してまいりました。
それじゃあ、あなたが家族だ。はい。
This very small interaction that just happens to say a lot of things. This little reaction shows so many things in a matter of seconds. It shows that Gojo does understand that he probably does feel a little bad about this whole situation Rico is in, which is also supported by the conversation he and Geto have later about, well, it is shown later, but it doesn't happen later, it happens earlier. The conversation about them giving Rico a choice as to whether or not she wants to go along with this vessel business. And in fact, the fact that they have a conversation proves that Gojo doesn't indeed care about people, at least to a certain extent. And also one last thing about Gojo's reaction, it could also be that Gojo has a soft spot for family, given that he does later take care of Toji's son, and she also takes in Itadori, and he kinda creates a small family. It isn't too stretched, I think. Either way, the fact that I can say all of this through a simple gesture says a lot about the quality on display here. It really is a shame not that many anime utilize the power of a simple reaction or expression and instead resort to annoying narration. Fuck you, Hunter x Hunter, because in this little interaction, the entire belief system Gojo has, all of that edgy, I don't care about people stuff, is not only getting tested, but we see a completely different side of it. That it may be a lie after all. And again, all of that through a small reaction. Quick side note, this, Soko explaining things, is not a bad setup. Of course, Gojo, someone who doesn't take training seriously and doesn't seem to pay attention to school, wouldn't understand this concept. However, something has changed for that payoff to work later. I'll get into more of what I'm trying to say here later. I'm just trying to get across, Gojo does not understand how any of this works. He doesn't understand that, okay? Okay, moving on. And on the topic of Gojo's training, This is one of the more standard scenes for me. It's a nice bait and switch. You expect Gojo to do the ultimate badass thing, but nope, he doesn't know how to do it. He clearly never bothered to try, further characterizing him as someone who is overconfident to the point where he doesn't care about improving. And again, with powers like these, why would he? It's a cool way to show us this flaw and that it is indeed a character flaw. This is also a good opportunity to talk about the fight scenes. Well, it's not really a fight. The action scenes. They are either short or skipped, for obvious reasons. Although that does hurt the pacing in one instance, for the most part they're good at conveying to us Gojo's show-off nature. He acts like a little kid and sometimes loses himself into fights, which again, it's a pretty good setup for later. Now the last thing I wanna touch upon before we get into the more questionable parts of the season. There is a nice interaction between Riko and Gojo. It shows how much he cares about the maid and that she is the only family she has.
私が天元様と同化するまでに黒井が帰ってこなかったらまだお別れも言ってないのに。
This interaction does quite a few things for both characters. It shows how much she cares for her maid and that she sees her as her only family. She would also put her life in danger to save her. And it also hints that deep inside, maybe she doesn't want to be the vessel. Maybe she just wants to spend time with the people she loves. Furthermore, it shows Gojo, as much as he doesn't want to admit it, he does care about the weak, as he called them, given how he reacts. He also does seem to respect Riko quite a bit more, after hearing that she would put her life in danger to save her quote-unquote family, which says quite a few things about him. And hell, after they save the maid, Gojo dedicates himself to protect her no matter the cost. He doesn't even want to go to sleep or relax until the mission is over because he clearly cares about her. It's a pretty good development for their relationship, that even though Gojo saw her as a unknowing little kid he had to babysit, he at least holds a little respect for her. And the fact that Gojo respects her for putting her life on the line, or at least for wanting to put her life on the line, does say quite a few things about Gojo and his real beliefs. Because if she respects people who put their lives on the line to save other people, maybe she also believes that's a good thing. And maybe the edgy philosophy he has is nothing but a front. Too bad the pacing around these scenes is kinda fucked. There's a lot of skipped time and it feels very unnatural. And even after the beach scene, we skip so much time. We skip a lot of stuff that could have developed these characters further. Gojo and Riko should have had that scene where they talk about being the vessel and if it's really worth it. It should have been right here, not seconds, literal seconds before her death. It would have developed both the relationship, their characters, and there is a reason why the setup for things happens earlier than the payoff. Because if you have the setup seconds before the payoff, kinda feels like rushing. Kinda. So, given that the show skipped a significant amount of time, I'm skipping it too. We're skipping to right here. Another side note, I haven't touched on Toji really, so here's a quick thing about him. He's pretty fucking good. He has personality, he has a weird family thing that makes him more human, and he is a force to be reckoned with. There is a lot to be said about him, I'm just not that passionate enough to do that. Here's one video if you're interested. Also shout out to Takehito Koyasu, who is an amazing voice actor with a unique and amazing voice, and he is good no matter what he plays. And side note too, although it is very relevant, how the fuck did Gojo survive a stab through the chest? His heart should be split in two. Oh, and it's about to get so much worse as well. Now the fight scene itself is admittedly pretty cool. There's some cool character stuff as well. It's the first time we actually see Gojo taking things 100% seriously, and he doesn't really show off, he seems to acknowledge Toji as a threat, and his character flaw is pretty effectively used here. Gojo, the guy who never trained because he believed he could not be beaten, just got beaten because he found someone that trained enough to fight him. This is Gojo at his best at this point right now, and he cannot win. And remember, he is dedicated to helping Rico at this point, so he's giving it his 100%. It's just that this 100% isn't good enough to stop Toji. If only he had trained more. And it also makes Toji a lot more threatening, since he didn't win because Gojo was stupid, he won because he was actually better than him. Gojo fails, which is very good direction to take this character. It shows that he isn't just a flawless, overpowered self-insert, he's a character, which was exactly what he needed. And boy, I can't wait to see how he evolves past this character arc. I sure hope nothing stupid happens that leads to everything being underwhelming. But yeah, so far, so good. The end of the fight I do have an issue with, however. Okay, so Gojo's dead. His entire body is split open. His insides should be out. His heart is definitely split now. And on top of that, his brain should be irreversibly damaged. There is no chance in hell he can use his brain right now to do anything. There's no way he can use it to use any Gears abilities, right? Just keep this in mind for later. Because there's still a lot to complain. And well, at least it shows how competent Toji is. Unlike most villains, instead of leaving the hero almost dead, he makes sure he's dead. It comes at the cost of some immersion because, well, Gojo needs to survive and it doesn't make sense how he survives any of this. Okay, so good guys lose. Toji is too much for them to handle and the unbeatable Gojo just lost. And a little girl is dead. So, how does the story proceed? Does Gojo acknowledge his failure and decides to focus on training to become better, since he now knows there are things that can stop him? What does Toji do next? Does he— wait, hold on. I have several questions. Let's go over all of them. How did Gojo survive this, even with healing powers? How did Gojo even use healing Gears powers without being able to use the fucking brain? How did Gojo, someone who prior to this moment had no idea how to use these healing powers, how did he magically learn how to use them at the last second? How? How the fuck did that happen? Oh, and on top of all of that, how in the fuck did he find Toads in the middle of nowhere? Okay. This is just way too many questions to answer. And there is no answer, right? There is no fucking answer. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And this is what I believe just kind of ruins all of this arc. Because what is it that happened exactly? Did he fail and then he decides to take things seriously and take training seriously so he can actually become better? And thus concluding this character arc? Nope. He just gains a power up because he realized he can resurrect himself. Yeah, he just did. There was no setup about it whatsoever. No, the fact that that one flashback where Soko was explaining things that Gojo didn't understand, that is not a setup. No, that's not how setups work. What part of this journey exactly helped him understand how to use these powers exactly? How is this earned in any way? Hold on. Wait a second. A character who had no idea how to use a certain power suddenly masters it out of nowhere, making it feel completely unearned? Where have I seen this before?
I can airbend? I can airbend!
Oh, Gojo is a
Maresu.
Now I was also about to complain about this whole Gojo feeling high on power or whatever this is supposed to be, but I actually watched a pretty good video by the Sensin as research, let's call it, and it was very insightful. All of Gojo's arrogant and overconfident nature takes over in this moment. That's why he is described as high, and it is a flaw of some sorts, and it is used later in the Shibuya arc, I am told at least. The fact that he gets so drunk with power makes him a lot more interesting, honestly. And if you want to know more about that, just watch the Sensi's video, since he can do a much better job than I ever could. So there is a merit to this scene, and as I said, there was a lot of setup to it. A lot of times where Gojo just got lost in battle, or he really liked to show off, or just wanted to fight. So yeah, there's good stuff. But again, I really feel like this payoff is really unearned. How would you make it feel earned, I hear you ask? Well, I have one solution. That doesn't mean it's the best, nor that it is the only one, but it is possibly a solution. Well, we can't escape plot armor now, so let's just say Soko saves them. We have a scene where Gojo acknowledges that he fails, where we acknowledge Riko's death, and where Gojo decides to actually train so he can actually be able to fight Toji. And then, after we have that implied training, then he fights Toji and wins. Since that is ultimately the point of this arc, right? Toji pushes Gojo past his limit. And that is why Gojo ends up to godlike status. And I like that point to be made. But the execution doesn't exactly make that point. Gojo needed to train to go past his limit, not to fail and then just magically acquire new powers. So, to sum up everything said about Gojo, the season adds a lot to his character that makes him a lot more compelling. However, the end of the journey feels unearned due to Gojo's sudden understanding of power he had no idea how to use before. Well, looks like the Gojo section isn't over. Not exactly, because, well, the anime adaptation decided to arguably hide a really important scene. The fucking epilogue of this arc is hidden behind the credits of episode 4, which I missed the first time watching it and the second, and I found this by accident. Whose idea was to hide it there, you fucks? A major point of criticism I had for these last episodes were the lack of acknowledgement for Riko's death and Gojo's failure. There seemed to be nothing to address these two. Until I saw this fucking epilogue that was hidden again. I say it was fucking hidden for some reason, arguably one of the most important scenes. So yeah, it's actually a pretty great scene that we acknowledge both of these things in a pretty neat way. I liked it. Why the fuck was it hidden behind the credits? Now, to really sum up about Gojo, let's say you can consider a lot of the criticisms I levied at this last part as nitpicks. They're not nitpicks, but I'll allow you to consider them as such. The one main point I want to stretch out a lot is really about the fact that he magically learns how to use a power completely out of nowhere. Now, why did it not work? Well, once again, I'm gonna stretch it out so everybody can understand it. There is nothing that we can infer that would have made Gojo be able to use this power, let alone understand it. And thus, it feels extremely unearned that he can't just do it out of nowhere. Because it really undermines all of that arc and the point of this arc. Otherwise, most of everything around it is pretty damn good. His relationship with Riko is pretty good, how his philosophy is explored, the way he shows off and how that affects him in the end, and even the conclusion, this epilogue that the fucking monkeys hid behind the fucking credits, even this was pretty excellent, and it sets up a lot of stuff about Geto as well, and most importantly, it does show us that Gojo did indeed fail. This wasn't just a fake flaw the script invented so we can say he has a flaw. No, the flaw he had actually had an impact on the plot, which is how things should be. And the Mary Sue comment I made was mostly a joke, because I do believe he's a pretty good character, but they really just fumbled it on the fucking finish line with that one ass pull. And it is an ass pull. I don't care how much you say it was set up earlier. Okay, And that's it about Gojo. Now let's talk about Geto. As I said, we as in anime only watchers, didn't know pretty much anything about Geto. And this arc does a pretty great job of introducing him. He's a fun guy, he's a good guy, he's a cool guy, and well, there's almost a problem immediately in this arc, and that is, Geto has been set up as too much of a good guy to have this development. There needed to be at least one hint. Hell, even Anakin Skywalker in the prequels had more setups than Geto. There were terrible setups, but they were there. Maybe though, just maybe, this one episode that focuses solely on his chains, maybe it will make sense of all of this. So let's take a deeper look into it. And there's something I gotta address immediately. Pacing has not been great this season. This episode specifically has got hurt the most. Geto goes from happy good guy to insane bad man in the span of 11 minutes, give or take. We fast forward so much time, so quickly, and the fact that we see Geto change his core ideology radically in these 10 minutes just feels very unnatural and unbelievable. Because again, as I said, there's no hints of him being a racist or just evil, so there is no previous setup or development. It all happens here, and because the new ideology he follows is so radically different from his previous one, it is really odd that it happens so quickly. But if the events that lead to this change make sense, then it should be okay. Theoretically. So do they make sense? Let's find out, because I haven't completely made up my mind on it either. So let's go over all of the factors of Geto's change. Firstly, we see his deteriorating state of mind. He is now more alone than ever, given that Gojo has become strong enough to go on missions alone. And now, let's open a parenthesis and talk about Jujutsu Kaisen 0. So Geto was a character I had no interest in until I watched Jujutsu Kaisen 0. He's probably one of the stronger anime antagonists I've seen, stronger as in strongly written. Although granted, there isn't too much competition. He's a character with depth. He sees non-sorcerers as subhuman and has no empathy for them, but he never came across as completely evil. He has a deep love for sorcerers, and his family of sorcerers, who were a group of misfits he gathered to help them. He never seemed like an insane character. He was just your regular run-in-the-mill racist, just with superpowers. So where I'm going with all of this is, all his actions seemed reasonable and not insane. So I'm not sure if the fall to insanity really fits his character, but it is a factor and not the only factor, which makes it a bit better. There's something still a little off about it. So the next reason for Geto's change is the cult of Tengen. Seeing all these people cheer for the death of an innocent little girl has him question morality and whether or not non-sorcerers are worth saving if this is how they are. Now this is a characterization that comes a lot more organically since it is a result of the previous arc, and it does fit his character. However, I don't think Geto is mature enough to believe that this crazy cult is how the entire world is. Hell, even the little girl he was trying to save was a non-sorcerer, and her death is the reason Geto is upset with a crazy cult. So Geto should understand that not everyone is evil, and this is where this descent into madness excuse comes in, and this is what I don't like about it. Now we can excuse everything this character does by simply saying, but he crazy. Although truth be told, it does get deeper than that. There are more reasons given. So let's go on to the next one. Geto, in his nihilistic state, has a talk with a special great sorcerer, Yuki Tsukumo. The two have a conversation about the nature of curses, and without getting into too much detail about it, the conversation leads to if all non-sorcerers were to disappear, curses would disappear too. And then Geto has a bright idea called genocide. And I kinda have an issue with this. Genociding all of humanity is not only nearly impossible, but also a very stupid and insane idea. Can society even exist with like 80% of humanity extinct? Unlikely. This is why Eren is worse than Hitler. Moving on. This plan may or may not lead to the extinction of the human race. Not to mention, how the fuck do you even achieve that? And because Geto finds this as a pretty appealing idea, it makes him pretty fucking insane as well. It's getting harder and harder to understand and empathize with this character. But there is something of a saving grace. Many villains in media have had some crazy plans, but the way they rationalize these plans does make them understandable. And there is something like that, which I'll get to in a bit. Lastly, the thing that pushes him over the edge is seeing two innocent sorcerer children treated like monsters, blamed for the misfortune of this village that the villagers have unknowingly brought to themselves by being evil. Given what Geto has been through and what we know about him, his outburst here makes perfect sense and it's completely understandable. Nothing really negative to say here. It is a pretty good event to push him over the edge. So now the last thing I wanna touch upon is the last confrontation of the two former friends. And it's here where you see Geto act a lot more reasonable.
術師だけの世界を作るんだ。誰でも彼でも理解してほしいとは思わないさ。
Despite the insane plan he has, what that shows is, despite how stupid and impossible this plan is, he's confident and reasonable about it. My point here being, he isn't just insane, he is reasonable to a certain extent. He just became extremely idealistic as a result of everything that happened to him. He's still friendly with Soko and Gojo, even though they are technically his enemies now, which makes him a lot more sympathetic and interesting. But the most important thing about this scene is how he explains himself.
親だけ特別というわけにはいかないだろう。それにもう私の家族はあの人たちだけじゃない。意味ない殺しはしねえんじゃなかったのか。意味はある。意義もね。
This is how Geto rationalizes his crazy plan. Gojo has inspired him in a way to create this ideal world by becoming like him. It is a really strong moment and it does make a lot of sense for his character and also makes him a lot more understandable. And also, Gojo, by becoming the most powerful, has accidentally turned his best friend into a genocidal maniac. It is a pretty fascinating drama to witness. And most importantly, this belief Geto has is ingrained very organically into his character. And something else that's pretty interesting is that Geto is fine with Gojo deciding to kill him. He still sees him as a friend that he disagrees with, but still respects. There's a lot of really good stuff here. And a side note, Gojo holding back from killing him really shows how far he's come from the beginning of this arc, where he was childish and didn't care about anything. Now we see him hold back, probably both because he doesn't want to hurt innocent bystanders and because he doesn't want to kill his best friend. It is a really well executed moment. So to sum up about Geto, what are in short all of the factors of his change? Firstly, she can see that Gojo is capable of anything, and he gets inspired by that in a pretty bad way. And he thinks if she can become like him, she can create his ideal world. Then is his deteriorating state of mind, which happened as a result of him going alone on missions. Then seeing everyone around him die, and seeing a lot of the people he's trying to save are absolute bastards or monkeys. And that talk about genocide, plus the event that pushes him over the edge. All of these events seem to follow a logical through line. And although his plan may make him seem like he's completely stupid and batshit insane, because of how she rationalizes it and how she explains himself, and how she can see an ideal future does make him a lot more reasonable. So what is done here is not bad by any means. But it could have been tweaked a bit, and it could have been a little better, which is what I wanted to say with this video for this arc as a whole. Especially for Gojo's segment, that needed a lot more work. And Geto just needed some more, maybe time. So yeah, it's not bad, but it could have been a little better. And trust me, I do want it to be better, and I hope you understand I'm not actively being a contrarian. I am not young defiant, my brain hasn't evolved to that level yet. I simply believe that there are some flaws and or mishandlings, and I want to express that opinion. Because I seem to be the only one who has it, and it does drive me insane a bit. And also because I don't want people to repeat these mistakes or flaws. I want people to learn from the mistakes in media so they don't get repeated. So yeah, if I was to rate this entire arc, I'd say it's pretty decent despite its issues sometimes. There's some real huge issues and there's some not so important issues, more like nitpicks. And so far, the Shibuya arc has also been pretty damn good. Aside from one little gripe I have with so far. And boy, I wonder what else they're going to do with Geto, since they have made me so interested in him. Maybe he sided with the curses to bring Sukuna back, so she can beat him and control him to complete his genocidal goal. Or maybe something else entirely is going to happen that comes completely out of left field and it's very lame. Who knows? And one last thing before I end this video. I don't expect to have gotten everything right, and I don't expect people to agree really. So if you think I am wrong, or if you have a counter argument, then go ahead and mention it. Unlike some people, I am not gonna hide behind the "it's my opinion, leave me alone" shield. Nor am I going to label every comment that disagrees with me as a hate comment. Criticism helps people get better, hence why I made this entire video as well. So please, constructive or not, mention your criticism. And will I make more videos? Who fucking knows? We're gonna find out together.
猿にはね、それぞれ役割があります。金を集める、呪いを集める。